Hello everyone, it's Dr. Rafael Gutierrez, and today I'm going to talk about the benefits of Kata as a reference for collaboration. Now, in the first part, I talked about how Kata can actually help improve the brain, how it reacts, and I use a lot of different data points. In this one, I'm not using as many data points. I'm actually basing it mostly on what the academic world feels is important for collaborating. And so that's what I'm going to be using, and I'm going to actually ask you to take a look at kata in a different way. For instance, a lot of times we get stuck on there's only one way to do things, and that's the way to do it. Every move has a name, and that's what it's meant to be done. And what I want you to do is take a step back with me. And instead of thinking this is the only way it can be done, to actually ask yourself, well, are there other ways that we can use the same movements? And if we do look at other specialists, other groups, and see how they'd use it, it may actually open the doors for a lot more power of the kata. Now, before I begin, I will actually mention that on August 24th, I will be doing an online seminar on Kushu for the International Neoclassic Karate and Kabuto Association. And I may actually mention some of these points along the way just because I think they are important. And so why kata would be beneficial for collaboration is because what it does is, like I said, I'm using the interpretation based on higher education. And what it gives us is we can actually look at kata and look at common goals. Now, when I say common goals, don't mean, well, we do this move this way, and so it's a block, and so how is this block going to be used in this attack? But sometimes it may be we're using this move, and instead of looking at it as something like a block, could it be something else? And by looking at what other people know about martial arts, for instance, if we do just karate and we can work with someone who does just jujitsu or just judo, do they use the same moves in the same way? And could the way they look at it help us bring out the strength of a kata? The other thing that actually a kata gives us is it can give us a shared language. We can actually talk about the first move of uh, Fugata ni, for instance. And people would know what we're actually talking about if they know the kata. It will also give us, if we are doing this collaboration, we can also then use these things to evaluate, well, does it work? Not necessarily is it the way we do it, but would someone else be able to use this, and would it function based on what they're telling us about? And so for this, we actually do need to get a goal. Now, I actually stole this from Strategies for Success, Interdisciplinary Collaborations. And I did put the link here if you want to actually read up on it. And what they actually say is we have to actually, when we are using something for collaboration, we have to define the goals and objectives. We need to have a shared language that we can actually determine. Now, in a lot of sciences, language is very specific. So for instance, in biology, if someone says it's a theory, it doesn't mean the same thing as a theory in layman. For instance, in layman, most people say theories are just an idea that hasn't been tested. In biological science and most science, theories are an idea that has been tested, and we have not been able to disprove it. Now, that's actually one of the things I ask you to do with me in this, is consider the fact that we may not be right, and so we want to actually look at other areas to see if there is a more correct answer. And so we do need the shared language. Like I said, if we said the first move of Pinan Shodan, we can all realize what move we're talking about, and the modifications can actually be made in that realm. Now, the other advantage of doing collaborations is it exchanges knowledge. Now, I tell people, I do not know much about grappling. I mean, sure, I've done seminars on it like everyone else, but I would not compare my knowledge to grappling to someone who is has been in jiu-jitsu for a month. It's a different style, it's a different art, but their knowledge can actually help us understand our thing. The other aspect of these collaborations should be to resolve conflicts. Now, what I mean by that is a lot of times we get stuck on well, this is a way we do kata, and this is why we do it, and everyone else is wrong. And it doesn't really allow for us to actually look at things different. It kind of limits us. And it's a really odd thing because if you look at all the gentlemen who started their own styles back in the birth of Okinawan karate, when everyone was making all these different styles, most of them did katas different than the other founders, and they seem not to actually have there didn't seem to be the conflict with this person did it different. In fact, there are some of the older gentlemen I've met who told me that, yeah, my teacher told me to go train with someone because they were taller or they were shorter. And so the idea of a kata can only be done one way. It may not necessarily be the best way to look at it if we're looking for usability of a specific move. Now, what we also want to do, though, is we would like to actually have a collaborative environment. That means that we actually have to look at people and see how they're looking at the kata. Now, let's say you have 4 people looking at the kata in 4 different ways. Let's say one person is looking at as how you do kata to win a tournament. They're going to approach the kata different than someone who is looking at a kata as in how to promote health, which may do the kata different than someone who's looking at it as how to win a full contact fighting tournament, which will be different than someone who's looking at it as in how does this move end the fight immediately. Now, none of these would be wrong based on what they're doing. If you're trying to win a tournament and you're not looking at how you do a kata to win a tournament, well, you're actually sabotaging yourself to lose. Likewise with the other aspects. And so the idea is with the collaboration, we can see the why someone would do something one way and why someone would do it different. And we can actually bring these things together and say, hey, well, look, some people want to compete. We may have a student who wants to compete in tournaments. So let's see what tournament people are doing. Some people may actually be looking at different aspects. And so that's actually one of the big things that is important with this collaboration. The other thing that a lot of the academics say is, when we are collaborating, we should try to look at promoting diversity and inclusion. What this means is not necessarily, oh, well, this group does it this way and this group does it that way because of language, but there are different viewpoints and there are people who have different specialties. Now, I will tell most of my students that I am an expert in certain fields, but if you get me out of the fields that I'm an expert in, I will not be even close to a novice in it. For instance, if I need a construction project done, I would be the last person I would tell someone to listen to. I know people who are experts in construction. They will tell you how to fix stuff I wouldn't be able to. And so the thing is, understanding that everyone has a specialty and they may be looking at it through their specialty will actually give you a stronger view of how to use kata and how to make your martial arts even better. Now, the last part of these collaborations would be looking at pretty much how to evaluate. And the evaluation can be based, again, on how someone is looking at a kata. Now, if we're actually collaborating and each one is doing something different, and we're evaluating based on, does it work for that field, then we can actually step back and actually say, well, someone is an expert in tournaments. Let's listen to how they say it. Someone else is an expert in biomechanics. Let's listen to that person for the biomechanics. And so what ends up happening is your martial arts would actually improve in multiple areas. Now, collaborating with kata and having a common goal. Now, I will tell you, this is my opinion. There's a lot of different people who may disagree. A lot of people will say there's only one way to do it. And that's fine. That's the way they want to do it. That's the way they want to do it. But if you're actually looking at applications and how to use kata, you have to determine how we're going to look at it. Are you looking at it through a sport? Are you looking at it through self-defense? Or are you using this iken hiatsu approach? The one move should end the fight. And like I said, different styles will approach the application different ways. Is something meant to be a strike? Is something meant to be grappling? Is something meant to be throws? And can one move have multiple applications? Now, if we decide that one move can only have one application, I feel that it would be limiting. If we actually look at the move and try to see, well, how is this move used by other specialists, we can actually increase, again, the force, the power that's in the kata. Now, we do have the idea of kata as a shared language. And one of the things that I do point out that I mentioned before is katas can be performed 100 different ways based on 100 different people, based on what they're actually doing. But a kata is a shared language. Now, a lot of times people get too stuck on the language. For instance, they may say one move is a block and they get stuck there. But if we just decide that, okay, we're going to use a kata, this is our language, and we're going to show how the kata works in different scenarios, we can share information a lot easier. So what I'm saying is, rather than looking at something as a block, we can say the first move of a kata, and we're using this high block, for instance, as a strike to the lower jaw. Does it have if it has the same mechanics, well, is it something that would work? Is it something that you can use? And so that's actually one of the things I'm actually talking about, of using kata as a shared language. Not necessarily this is a block, so it's a block, but this is a move, how can we use it? We also can illuminate the defining words. Every move in the kata can be a technique which can be used as needed, as interpreted by the style. And this seems to be a bit of repetition, but the reason is, what we're trying to talk about is, yes, using the same kata, the same techniques in multiple ways. Now, they also talk about resolving conflict with styles. Now, what I mean by that is this. If you actually remember what I said earlier, in the past, it seems like the original founders didn't have an issue with this. You had multiple high-ranking people who made their own styles, and they would collaborate with people of other styles, and they would do the katas different. The katas were modified for the style and sometimes in the individuals. And so the thing that ends up happening is, if we step back and instead of saying this is the only way, if we look at it as this is one way, and there are different opinions and different, I will say, experts in this way that can look at it different, we can actually see how this works. For instance, if we look at Fugata Ni, the first move, the opening move, someone can say, well, if you're standing at a relaxed position and someone throws a punch to your face, this is a block for a straight punch. Well, someone else can say, well, yeah, that would work if you're doing it in a certain scenario, but if someone's throwing a haymaker, you can also use the same block to block the haymaker, but you're going to use the elbow to block, not the fist. Someone else can say, well, if someone is trying to grab you, you can use that upper block to put space between you and your attacker, or even use it as, like I said, an attack to the lower portion of the neck. And so the thing is, by this, we can see different ways to look at it, and we can start looking at creating some sort of collaborative environment. By viewing the kata not as a specific, this is the only way to do it, but rather as a mold for discussion, we can actually see various techniques for this, various applications for the same technique, or we can also look at how kata could be used for different aspects. Now again, in the past, the founders didn't have a problem with this. The other thing that we can actually do is promote what they call inclusivity. A lot of people don't feel heard, and it's not necessarily because we don't care what they have to say, but because we're not necessarily looking at other ways to look at this. Now, if we are actually using them not as, again, a specific move, but rather the technique, and then looking at how to use, we can eliminate the naming and what a kata is supposed to be doing in our view, and look at it as reference points for these collaborations. Now, by doing this, we can actually include other martial artists into this aspect. Maybe someone doesn't do a specific kata, but if we're actually going to be talking about, hey, we want to know how someone who does specialized in throws would use aspects of this kata, they can actually look at the kata, whether they've performed it or not, and look at the moves and say, yes, I use this, this, and this to do this type of throw. And it would actually end up increasing the power of our kata by giving us information that is not necessarily what we necessarily would have practiced. And so what we're doing is number 3 in this list that I made, we'd be looking at outside activities to interpret the moves. We can actually look at all these different martial arts and how they do it. We can even go beyond that. And I think, in my eyes, I believe that we should be going even beyond that and looking at other sports to see how they develop power and how they use the same movements to determine, pretty much to produce more power or more control in different things. For instance, you could look at baseball, swinging a bat, and comparing it to blocking. Now, once we actually do that, once we're actually starting to bring in different things, we can start looking at how to evaluate the process. Now, we have to determine what we are looking at. If we're looking at, does this work in an iken hiatsu situation, then that's what we're at. We need an expert who can tell us, will this cause an injury that will stop the fight? If we're looking at the process as, does this win a tournament? We have to look at it as, well, this person won a tournament. What are they telling us we need to do to win the tournament with this move and this kata? And so the thing is, by this, we can actually look at, we can evaluate, does it work for that scenario? And it may not be the scenario you're looking at, but it can help you understand why someone would do it a little different. And it may end up even increasing how you do a kata based on that. The other thing we can actually do is a move safe? Can this move be used against an unwilling partner? If it can, we can actually try it in application. We can tell an unwilling partner, okay, I'm going to do this. It shouldn't cause any serious damage. And so you can try it with someone who's fighting against you. Now, what I mentioned is if the technique can cause permanent damage, you can't really tell someone, hey, fight this, and let me see if this shreds your knee and gives you a permanent injury. You have to actually take another route. What I would act in that case, based on the way I would do it and based on my experience, I would tell people you have to look at the data in medical journals to see if there are injuries that occur that are caused by certain ways. And sport injury journals are really good at showing us this. So are emergency medical journals. And if you go to a local library, if you go actually to a college library, you usually can access all these. And it will show you what will and won't work. And so I did want to make this short. I want to thank you guys for getting to the end of the video. And I would really appreciate anything that you see that you may disagree with in this video, anything you see that you may agree with. And if you're interested in the seminar that I'm doing, again, it's going to be on August 24th. I hope you enjoy this and have a nice day.